live streamed at boston.gov/City Council TV. It will be rebroadcasted on Comcast Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Verizon Channel 1964. We will take public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you wish to testify via video conference, please email michelle.a.goldberg@boston.gov for the link. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation, residency, and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. You may also submit written testimony by emailing ccc@sbwd@boston.gov. Here we go. Today's hearing is on Docket 0983, an order for a hearing regarding planning to support our restaurants and bars. Our expected speakers today include Bob Luce, President and CEO of the Massachusetts Restaurant Association, Michael Serpa, Select Oyster, Ginger Brown, Executive Director of Jamaica Plain Street/South Main Streets, Jay Walsh, Executive Director of Downtown North Association, Doug Beacon, Red Paint Hospitality Group, and I believe we have a dude, Steve, who is also in the room. I don't think he's slated to speak. Our second panel is the administration is Natalia Ugarte. She's the Director of Small Business for the Small Business Office. Chris English, the Chief of Staff for ISD. Dan Manning, Assistant Commissioner of ISD. Vineet Gupta, Director of Planning for BTD. Jacob Wessel, Public Realm Director, BTD. Leslie Delaney Hawkins, Executive Secretary for Boston Licensing Board. I will now recognize my colleagues for opening statements before turning this over to our panelists. Councillor Bach, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you to all the panelists for joining us today. I filed this hearing order after a conversation with Michael Serpa, who's joining us today from Select Oyster, which is a business on Newbury Street in my district. Michael previously was involved in a number of other restaurants, including Neptune Oyster, and grew up in I think a Cuban family in Miami that's been chefs for generations, and represents, I think, the kind of independent proprietor that we want to keep in our restaurant business in the city. He and I discussed the concerns that we all have about keeping our local restaurant ecosystem, making sure that we don't have lots of vacancies that get turned over to chains in this crisis. And we talked about the ways in which the city has been able to help with the patio dining and a number of kind of loosening of restrictions, and thinking about, as we go into the winter and the year ahead in 2021, what we can do to be really proactive about helping this community survive over the coming year. And I just want to acknowledge at the beginning of this hearing that I think it's obvious that our restaurants, our independent businesses, they need another significant federal package of support, and that it frustrates me to no end as a city councilor that we're not able to sign those checks at the city level. But I do think the onus, so it's not to say that any of the things we're going to discuss today are a substitute for that kind of fundamental economic aid. But I think that as a city, we can still look at all the pieces that we have and really think about how we can help on the margins. So the types of things that I certainly am hoping to hear from the administration today is about, committing to a long outdoor eating schedule for next year and committing ahead so that our independent proprietors can actually spend the money now to invest in the infrastructure they need for that, knowing it's going to be useful, that we can really plan actively on pedestrianization. This is in my district. We've had open Newbury Street and open Charles Street in the past. I'd love to see those coming back. But also, how can we have pedestrianization events in all of our main streets districts around the city, in every neighborhood, and think about those as a way to drive outdoor business. I know in Mission Hill, we've got Mission Hill Main Streets already planning a restaurant week for October, thinking about how we can really actively support with marketing and technical assistance our main streets districts, and doing lots of things on that front. And really looking at how we have a 4-season Boston this year. So I think about the winter wonderland we've had on City Hall Plaza before. Obviously, City Hall Plaza's dug up this year. Could we be having kind of outdoor winter fun activities scattered around the city that would help draw people out of their houses this winter, give people an opportunity to socialize more safely in the public health crisis, and again, drive business to our operators. Love to see us doing Christmas markets. Love to see us just really thinking outside of the box here. So I do want to thank the mayor and his team for extending outdoor dining to December 1st. I think that was a good step, but I just think we really need to think very ambitiously and crucially give our small businesses the advanced knowledge that they need to really plan for success here. So that's the goal from my perspective. And I also know that we're going to hear today in our first panel from a number of folks who may have other ideas I haven't said here, and that's why we've invited them to join us. So thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. I'm going to change your name. Sorry about that. But before we move on, I'd like to also acknowledge that we have been joined by two other colleagues, Councilor Flynn from District 2 and Councilor Ricardo Arroyo from District 5. But before we move on, I'm going to ask Councilor Breeden to share some opening remarks. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will keep my remarks very brief. I really am so delighted to co-sponsor this hearing today because our restaurants and our bars are a vital part of our local economy. They employ hundreds and hundreds of employees in Alston Brighton, thousands maybe. And I just feel that anything that we can do in terms of thinking outside the box and thinking creatively about strategies that we can do at a local level here in the city to try and support our these businesses to get them through this rough patch is of vital importance. I agree with Councillor Bach that this really demands a federal response, a massive injection of some more money into this situation to try and keep these businesses afloat. But in the meantime, we have to try and work locally and see what we can do to help. And thank you to all the panelists, and thank you to the administration folks for joining us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Breeden. I'm going to ask if any of my colleagues are interested in opening remarks. I'm going to go in order of arrival. Councilor Campbell, you now have the floor.
Can you see me? Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and of course, thank you to the makers as well. Very critical topic. It continues to be a topic. So I appreciate being able to listen to all the folks who have decided to join as panelists to listen to your ideas. I will tell you some of my questions for the administration have to do with the main streets, which is what Councillor Bach was bringing up, because some parts of my district do not have a main streets, or there are some leadership changes going on there. So really want to get a deeper understanding as to what we're doing for those pockets that don't have coverage or don't have the infrastructure with respect to recovery and support for their small businesses. So thank you again, and thank you to the makers. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I'm going to now ask my colleague, Councillor Flynn. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia. Thank you to the makers of this important hearing. Thank you to the chair for organizing this, and to the panelists. I see Bob from the Mass Restaurant Association, the critical role the association is playing during this pandemic. When I think of a restaurant in my district, I think of the bartender, I think of the waitress and the small business owner, and for a lot of people, that's their second job. That's how they pay their electric bill. That's how they pay their gas bill, or put food on their table for their kids. Other people, it's their full-time job as well. But my district especially employs literally thousands of people in the restaurant business, and their family. These restaurant workers are teachers. They're active in the PTA. They're Little League coaches, and the restaurant owners contribute to our neighborhood organizations and nonprofits as well. So it's more than just getting a beer and a hamburger at a restaurant. It's they play a critical role in our economy. I had the opportunity as a kid to work for 4 years at Anthony's Pier 4 restaurant, and I was the popover boy and in high school, and I loved the job, but I saw the waitresses, how hard they worked as their second job, putting food on their table for their kids. But we're in a recession, we're in a pandemic, and we need to think outside the box to be supportive of our restaurants. We saw the outrageousness of these delivery companies trying to charge 30% to deliver a hamburger or a steak to someone's house as a delivery charge. That's outrageous. This body took that issue on, and there's more work that we need to do. But I'm also, as Councillor Bach and Councillor Campbell mentioned, I would love to see a federal assistance program for the restaurant owners. I'd also like to see a state assistance program and a city assistance program for the restaurant owners too, whether that might include a little assistance on property tax and making sure that our restaurants stay afloat, get them back up off the ground. That's what Boston's all about. When you're down in your luck and you're on the ground, it's about lending a helping hand. And the restaurants have always been there for us, so it's our turn to be there for the restaurants. So thank you, Councilor Mejia, and to the makers. And it's good to see so many of the panelists that I know very well.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Flynn. I also want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councillor O'Malley. I'm going to move, we're doing opening remarks from our colleagues, Councillor O'Malley. So the next in line is Councillor Arroyo, then followed by you, Councillor O'Malley. So we'll now move on to Councillor Arroyo. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you in advance to the panelists for the attention they've brought to this issue and the work that they're doing. Our restaurants, especially in my district in Rosendale, Mattapan, and Hyde Park, but especially in my main street areas, the restaurants serve as anchors. But beyond that, so many of our restaurants and our small businesses that have been impacted by this pandemic really create economic anchors for the Black community, for the Latino community, for our immigrants who are entrepreneurs and who start these small businesses and are right now watching so much of what they've built over decades go out the door. And it's an incredibly heartbreaking situation on a personal level. But from a policy city level, we're also dealing with a situation where if we can't find a way to keep them in place, the economic impact of that for not just those individuals, for not just those individual communities, but for the city as a whole is going to be very real. And so I also echo, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Bach, Councillor Braden, and Councillor Flynn in their request for federal funding to this and for state funding to this issue, because it's incredibly necessary. And if we don't provide some kind of aid and some kind of way out for these folks, we're going to be looking at an economic collapse in our neighborhoods that is going to be beyond just losing a favorite bar or a favorite restaurant. It has these ripple effects that are incredibly devastating. And so this is an incredibly important issue. And I thank the makers and I thank the chair for holding this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Arroyo. I will now move on to Councillor Matt O'Malley from District 6. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see you virtually. This obviously is an incredibly important issue as we figure out ways we as a body can support our small businesses amid the pandemic. It is absolutely crucial that we use every tool in our toolbox to do just that. I've been proud to have partnered with a number, I think every councillor signed on the efforts, particularly with Councillor Flynn and Flaherty, as it relates to supporting our restaurants and these predatory third-party delivery fees, which have really had a negative impact for so many small businesses. But moreover, I'm really looking for ways that as the weather changes, as it gets a little bit cooler, we can work to support the restrictions, the common sense, in my opinion, public health restrictions that limit inside dining and inside eating. I was on a panel not too long ago and sort of talking about the way local government reacted to COVID-19. And one thing that I said was pretty remarkable is that we all know government often moves at a glacial pace. And as it relates to many restrictions and changes in policies to support small businesses, we actually worked very quickly in many ways as it relates to Perhaps not as quickly as some might think, but as you think about ways that we were able to make it easier for restaurants to deliver, and then worked with our state legislature delegation to make sure that they could deliver alcoholic drinks or drinks to go. So I do appreciate the spirit and the willingness for government agencies to work to support these businesses. I'm looking forward to hearing from many restaurateurs and operators, many of whom I've talked to in my district, for ways that we can support them. Just a week or two ago, I sent a letter to the administration looking at ways to make it easier and some grants perhaps available for outdoor heaters to allow for outdoor seating to be extended as the weather gets cooler. So there's a lot of work we need to do. Clearly, we as a body are committed to this, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the operators and owners and workers and making sure that we can support them and support this vital interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. I will now turn the conversation over to our first panel. We will hear testimony from our first panel, and then we'll have my colleagues ask their questions to them before going on to the second panel. And I ask our panelists to please keep your remarks and testimony to no more than 5 minutes, because if you don't, you will be muted. No, I'm just joking. But we are trying to keep this under time. So if you could keep your remarks to 5 minutes, I'm going to have my colleague Jacob send me a text when your 5 minutes are up. So I am going to move on to our first panelist. Mr. Luce, you now have the floor. Oh, I'm out. Okay, Mr. Luce, we can't hear you, and that will not count towards your time. So let's reset the clock, and Mr. Luce, you get a do-over. You now have the floor.
Okay, I assume you can hear me now.
Yeah.
So what I will say is I appreciate you using my Portuguese heritage pronunciation of my last name, but when my family came over from the Azores, they Americanized it, so it's Bob Luz. So anyways, no problem. So thanks for having me here. Look, I've been before this group before. I've indicated how devastating it is. And, here we are now turning a new page, literally as we turn the seasons. And, what started as a 3-week shutdown, now we're looking down the barrel of winter coming upon us. And, we are working aggressively to try and figure out how we can help the restaurants make it through this seasonal change. I do think we've done a number of things collectively to sort of promote fall dining and outside dining as well. And again, not only did Mayor Walsh do what he's done, the governor has actually extended the order for premises and for outdoor activities till 60 days after he removes the emergency order. So that allows everybody to sort of plan for how do we, if there's things we can do now to afford to be able to do outdoor seating on the other side of winter early on, we can plan for it. I think there's, a couple of things coming up from a timely basis right now. And Councilor O'Malley just spoke about this before, but there's no question safety is important. Safety is the number one thing for any operator. So let's start with that premise. But I think there's some things that we can hopefully work with the fire department on, so that operators can get these tents heated, that we can deal with them as we close flaps, not as an indoor structure. So I know there's been some conversations with the licensing group and the fire department on this. We need to have those continued conversations. I think there's opportunities. We've closed streets in the summer. Why can't we close them in the winter? And the reality is, let's face it, it's not like we're pushing traffic out of the streets at this point. And so I think, we can look at how we can get creative. We're going to come out with and try and promote a BYOB thought process of bring your own blanket. I think it plays a long ways. And I think the guest has shown they will be accommodating for weather. So I think they're going to give us some leeway here as it gets a little cooler. September, early October usually are pretty good months. We've seen that. Next couple of days are going to rain. That's not going to be good. So whatever we can do to try and ease it and get it inside the four walls of tents and extend that as far as possible is important. When we go inside, I think we need to start promoting the fact it is safe. And the governor actually just did this on his conference just now. But anytime that I've spoken to people, when they go inside, they come away and say, wow, you're doing a great job with protocols. It is very safe. And I think it really should be noted, restaurants have been open since June 8th. They've been open indoors since June 22nd. And not one single spread has been tied to restaurants. And so we need to start talking about that and make sure people understand it is really safe to come into a restaurant. And the protocols are being taken very, very seriously. So the other thing is we got license renewal process coming up. It is expensive. We have problems in that some restaurants or bars and event spaces haven't even reopened at all. And so to tie up large sums of money on license renewals, especially with liquor liability insurance and workers' comp cost, if I'm not even open, we're trying to figure out how to work with that. And so any help that the city can give us to that point, I think is really important for restaurants. But there's a very resilient community out there that we've lost a lot of players. The ones that are there are really trying to reinvent themselves every day. And, we got to work together to make sure that we get them over to the other side here.
Wow, Mr. Luce, you did great.
That's okay. Thank you for that pronunciation.
Good job. Good job to your team. You did 5 minutes and like probably 10 seconds over. So the next speaker is going to have to make up for that.
All right.
No, thank you so much for your testimony. We really do appreciate it. I am going to move on to Michael Serpa. You now have the floor. And wait, let me start the timer here. You are set to start. Okay, you now have the floor.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you to the City Council, Councilor Bach, obviously as well, kind of put this together. Bob, obviously from MRA, hit on a lot of the main points there and a lot of the concerns of restaurateurs and operators and what we have going on. The city has done great stuff to help us out already. And as one of the other councilors mentioned, in, overnight, essentially, getting together with Department of Transportation and licensing board and all that stuff. Patios have been one of the hugest helps. Obviously, people are very, very hesitant to dine inside at the moment. So the patios is something where we're saying, okay, we can survive, we can operate with that. That's a big help. As I mentioned to Councilor Bach, that's something we want to have a little bit more clarity on if we can continue that next year to kind of help dig out of the hole. And obviously the city and state have been helpful with that, extending that as long as we can. But really, obviously, it's a federal issue. The city can't fund what we need. Pushing the federal government to extend that and give us a little bit more assistance is really what we're needing at this point. It's such a large industry. But I think that starts with the city doing whatever the city can, pushing the state to get the state to do what the state can, and the state pushing the federal, pushing up, saying, hey, we need to make noise and see, what's going on. So the, state items that we can address, obviously, Mr. Lutz from MRA said, citywide, reforming the liquor license renewal stuff, that stuff's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Many places aren't even open. So that's a challenge. That's a big money thing. Statewide meals tax is a major item. Either forgiveness on meals tax, freezing meals tax going forward for the season. That's something where you're saying, okay, meals tax is maybe that's your rent. Maybe that's your rent that you can cover another month and you can stay open and you can make it to the end of the pandemic. But people are now making the decision, do I pay my meals tax? Do I not pay my meals tax? I think that's something where we could figure it out in a different manner to give the people a little bit more flexibility and give them a little bit of air to, you know, maybe keep somebody employed, keep payroll, make rent, you know, kind of all that stuff. The whole thing is that independent restaurants, independent operators are really, really struggling, be it you're small, be it you're medium sized. I don't think there's any independents that are necessarily big comparatively, but the mom and pop shop, the pizza shop, the Mexican restaurant, the Nigerian restaurant, you know, the Colombian place, whatever it might be, those are the places that are really, really going to struggle. Where you're saying, I put everything I have into this pizza place, and I'm, you know, trying to figure it out, trying to cover my rent, and you just, at some point, you just can't make it, and there's no more money, and there's no more backing, and you've already used every federal help you can. So I think that's something where the more the city can do to push the state, the more the state can do to push the federal. That's really what we need. Federal PPP and the EIDL loans, those were designed for 6 weeks, and we're talking about a year here. This is, you know, we closed March 15th with no idea how long we're going to be closed. And if we're open full speed ahead on March 15th, I'm going to be shocked. So, you know, we really, really need that help. We need whatever we can get from the city. Property tax is something big on landlords. If we want to do rent forgiveness, you know, they need also property tax forgiveness, and, you know, other help there. Indoor dining, outdoor dining, the extension is great. Obviously, everyone knows that Boston is very cold in the winter. Whatever we can do to promote indoor dining being safe, if we feel it's safe, and then outdoor dining relief, whatever we can do there. But really, next year I think is the big issue. If you can make it to next year, how we can do that, and having a clear picture forward for an operator. But really, I think the city has been doing really, really tremendous things for us. We're very, very grateful about it. We're saying, wow, the city's like on the fly, just allowing us to do a lot of things that we normally weren't able to do. And people are getting used to that stuff. So we're trying to get a little bit more clarity going forward. Hopefully we can continue that stuff. But, you know, thank you guys for all your help with that so far.
Thank you. Wow. I'm sure Councilor Bach prepped you both because you are well within the time frame. Thank you, Michael. Really do appreciate your testimony and your timeliness. Thank you. So I'm going to move on now to Ginger. You now have the floor. Ginger Brown, you now have the floor.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I want to say I agree with Matt O'Malley. He mentioned how quickly the city moved to approve licensing and permitting. That as someone who has opened a restaurant in this city, the processes at ISD, the fire department with licensing, the licensing board, those are time-intensive processes which will try the most patient of souls. So I want to thank the city, the city council, for having made that much easier and much faster. I do think it made a huge difference. I think in terms of what the businesses in my district need, there are things that are costing them money right now, which is more than it normally would. And then there are ways that they need to make more money. Things that are costing money, for example, are the delivery fees, which I'm glad to hear are still on the radar. There's also the credit card fees. More people are using credit cards now than ever before. And that is a bigger chunk of change out of the business owner's pocket. I don't know that that's something you can address on the local level, but it is one more thing that the restaurants are dealing with. Also, the cost of buying everything that they might have needed for outdoor seating, or even the precautions they have to take inside, that's an additional cost that they were not able to budget for. And then they just went through a long period of not being open. So that's money they had to pull out of their pocket somehow. Perhaps it was a loan, etc. It would be a real shame that the money they put into doing all of that only lasted them till December 1st. If it ends up being furniture, furnishings, barriers, etc., that they can never reuse again, it's a huge loss to that business. So if we can consider extending the outdoor seating, if we can make it come back again, I think that would be a great way to make sure that the businesses got their bang for their buck. The other thing the businesses need is ways to make money and put bluntly, more customers. We need more customers. So my district did a survey right as reopening was beginning. And I was very shocked to discover that a lot of residents are just waiting for a vaccine. They just want to know that it's absolutely safe before they will go back out. And they're taking advantage of things like delivery or takeout, but they do not feel safe going back out into the community. So I think if there's a way for the city to take the temperature, so to speak, of the residents and find out what it will be that makes them feel safe enough to go back out to our businesses, that would be helpful. Because we've already learned that our businesses are creative and innovative and that they can change to meet the demand. But if they have no idea what this demand is, they're not going to know what they can offer their customers. All they have to rely on is everything that they've been doing before. So along those lines, if we can also have campaigns encouraging people to go back out, as Bob Lewis was just saying, like, we need to convince people it's okay to go back out there. So if there's something the city can do that, particularly around holiday time. I know that the Mayor's Enchanted Trolley Tour may be canceled, but maybe there's something alternative we can do that convinces people to go back out to our businesses. It's going to be safe. We have these precautions in place. That's really all I can think of on that front. I do want to say New York City is considering year-round outdoor dining, and I don't think we should let them beat us.
Okay, Ginger, fighting spirit there. And you have a minute left, so I really do appreciate you yielding your time and letting New York know that they're not going to beat us. I appreciate that. I'm going to now ask Jay Walsh to share with us your testimony. And again, you have 5 minutes, but if you want to go over, you can utilize the time that Ginger left. How about that? I'm gonna start.
Trust me, I'll be selling my remainder of time because I know I won't use it. But I just want to say thank you to Councilor Bach and Councilor Flynn, both of whom have a piece of the area that the Downtown North Association makes up, which is predominantly in the North Station and West End. So we have the benefit of being located right within walking distance to the TD Garden, but we also have been victims of the lack of events there. We have the benefit of having our population grow by tens of thousands a day of folks coming through North Station, commuting to work from north of the city, and also the 260 some odd days that the Garden has events. We've seen, folks come and enjoy a lot of the local establishments pre and post event at the Garden. That being said, I think we've seen a lot of folks that have had to change on the fly. Their whole business model was kind of thrown into disarray, and a lot of them had to kind of adjust to the new normal with the pandemic. And I think the utilization of outdoor space has been a godsend. The folks in the city that we worked with were amazing in their readiness to get folks what they needed in terms of getting them approved for what they couldn't do, and telling them the protocols and to set that up. That's something that we hope continues. And I agree with Ginger. Let's beat New York to that and do it as quickly as humanly possible. My background is before this, I was in government, so I know that the process is timely, and it's involving a lot of different constituencies, and I appreciate that. But one of the other things that we have had the benefit of, I know Councilor Bach mentioned Newbury Street and others that they've closed for Open Newbury, but we've done the same thing on Canal Street. We've done it tied to events at the Garden, whether it was a country concert or before the Bruins playoff run last season. We saw that our public spaces can be utilized for pedestrians in a positive way. So we hope that we can continue that not only on Canal Street, but adjacent streets such as Portland, Friend, Valenti Way, et cetera, and expand that. So we know that we do have partners in the city that are going to be on the next panel that agree with that approach, but we're hoping that it continues and that we can expand it and get more people involved. We know this is really difficult, and just to echo what Mr. Luz said, is that there's a lot of concern out there for folks that don't know if it's safe, to go inside to a restaurant. And when he says that there have not been any outbreaks tied to people dining in restaurants, I think that's information that needs to get out to the public so they understand that it is safe for them to go. Because as everyone knows, there is a lot of misinformation coming from the folks at the national level and a lot of stuff on social media and others that I'm sure a lot of folks are confused, myself included. So I will say that I appreciate the opportunity to join in. We appreciate all the help that we've been given so far, and we look forward to working with folks as we go forward and hopefully get back to a new normal soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you're right, you saved $1.52 that time. Great job. I am going to move on. Thank you for your remarks. Really do appreciate it. I'm going to be moving on to Doug Bacon. Bacon. And this is as easy as you spell it. You now have the floor. And correct me if I misspelled it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's bacon. It's like bacon and eggs in the morning.
I thought so, but then I wasn't sure because what happened with Bob Luce, I just wanted to make sure I had it right.
Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to everyone on this call. Just a very brief introduction. 30 years ago, I was bartending, and I scraped together a little money for a down payment, and I bought a little neighborhood bar in Oak Square that is now operating and called The Last Drop, and I still own it. And in the last 30 years, I've expanded and added more locations, and I now own 8 locations, 3 in Alston, 2 in Brighton, 1 in each in the Back Bay, Kenmore, and Fenway neighborhoods. But when the pandemic was starting, I had 196 employees, and now I have around 82 employees. And I am in the neighborhood restaurant and bar business and pub business, and my places provide jobs and a meeting place and a community place for people who live in the neighborhood, and we offer inexpensive food. So we have gotten help from the federal government with the PPP program, and I also have applied for and gotten grants from the city of Boston for the reopening program, and that has been super helpful. Some of my locations I will not reopen because one of them is just a bar and it's not permitted to open. And another one is right next to Symphony Hall and relies on business from events at Symphony Hall and the Huntington Theater and New England Conservatory. So there's very limited population now in those neighborhoods for people who were my customers. The biggest challenges are keeping up with the rent for landlords, especially on places that are closed, and mortgages. I have had landlords who actually told me that they would take advantage of the opportunity to default my lease if they could, because they knew I was paying below market rent, and they thought that they would get another tenant who would pay more if I left. So that has been a challenge. The city has been extremely helpful with outdoor extended patios. And with one point that has already been mentioned on that, it would be super helpful if the city of Boston would come out and announce positively that we are going to be able to have extended outdoor patios again next spring and next summer, because we're looking at paying for storage for things like furniture and jersey barriers. And some operators are saying, what should I do with all this stuff? Should I pay to store it all winter if I'm not going to be able to use it again? So that would be super helpful. It's been mentioned by others before. Some of the other things that the city of Boston can do or could do or look at are some flexibility on permit renewals. License fees and taxes are some of the highest expenses we have. My smallest location, which is just a little neighborhood bar in Brighton, pays annually $5,000 in license fees and $6,000 in taxes annually. So even though I'm closed, it's about $200 a week just to keep up with those expenses. And the license fees are going to come due in November. If the city could come up with a way to either defer or discount or provide grants to help with the license fees, that would be super helpful. We're all concerned about getting through the license renewal process and keeping our businesses able to reopen when this pandemic passes, and hopefully the day will come soon next year. If we don't have a space to do business and our landlords default our leases, we won't be able to reopen. And if we don't have a liquor license, we won't be able to reopen. So those things are possibly the most important. I have the other thing I was going to ask is, I have been calling myself to Representative Presley, Representative Kennedy, Senator Warren, and Senator Markey. We need another stimulus program from Washington, D.C., and the Restaurant Association has been getting our message out. If any of you on this call have a way to reach our elected officials in Washington, there's nothing more important to the survival of restaurants and pubs and bars in Boston and Massachusetts than getting that stimulus program. So I do want to say thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Really do appreciate your advocacy. And you were right within the 5-minute mark. So thank you so much. Good job. Yes, and I'm curious about the dude, Steve, is not on the list, right? He was just someone that you wanted to let in, Councilor Bach. Just curious about.
I think he's here with Mr. Luz. So I don't know if Bob, he was just going to kind of support you, or if Steve had separate remarks.
No, he is here and to help support me. But more importantly, there is a national call that I have to jump on at 4 o'clock. And so he'll be here in my stead to answer any questions that come up. And I'll come back if you're still on.
Okay, and his real name is Steve
Clark.
Clark, not the dude as he wanted to be called. This is a formal hearing, Mr. Luce. We have to have some rule and order here.
That's right.
And I just also want to acknowledge that we've been joined by my colleague, Councilor Asabi George. So if you just want to say hello really quick before I move on to questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just hello, everyone. Sorry to be tuning in late. I will make sure to review what I've missed in my absence. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, thank you. So in the order and in the interest of making sure that we have some time with Mr. Luce, and you were one of the first speakers, we're going to start off with you. Hopefully our colleagues will ask questions and we'll give you an opportunity to be the first to respond. So I'm going to start with the co-sponsors of the hearing order first. Councilor Bach, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. And I just wanted to highlight, I definitely heard your point, of Mr. Luz, about the sort of needing to work with our fire department to be creative about tents and heaters. And I know that's something I've been hearing a lot. And I think we have a lot of cities to our north, when you think about Quebec City, Toronto, Montreal, where you've got, a Canadian government that's very interested in safety and fire safety, and yet that has managed to kind of have those more durable spaces for restaurants outside in cold weather. So I just appreciated that point, and I think it's something we should raise with the administration in the next panel. I guess the one question I'll raise kind of across the board, I know, Michael, it might make sense for you to speak to it a little bit, and Ginger, and Bob, if you like, is just, and actually Jay as well, who mentioned Canal Street, just whether you think that pedestrianization, like closing streets, even in the winter for some kind of, holiday market, Christmas market. I lived in England for a while, and these used to happen around December. Something that would give an opportunity for some outdoor retail and restauranting, whether you think that that's like a viable possibility, would be helpful. And then Michael, I don't think you spoke in general as much to the open Newbury concept, but I know that you've appreciated it in the past. So if you had any comments on that front.
So I'll start. I mean, look, I do think it can work. And I think that the public has shown an appetite, if you would, for outdoor dining and for being outdoors. I can tell you, coincidentally, having nothing to do with any pandemic, twice last winter, I happened to eat outside in an igloo down in Newport, Rhode Island. And each time I was with once it was a party of 6, once was a party of 8. And it was a really cool experience. On one of the nights, it was actually lightly snowing out. It was a terrific time. We had a great time, and ate with our jackets on. It's a little bit different, but you know what? I think the guests, in years gone past during the summertime for patios, if it was 82 degrees and even a hint of humidity, the guests would say, "Oh, I'll eat inside." This year, we found that at 94 degrees and humidity, they're like, "Hey, it's a beautiful day. I'll eat outside." So I think on the flip side, they're going to feel that same resiliency when the cooler weather is upon us. And it provides us that opportunity. So I do think that there's a possibility there. And again, it's not like we're going to be causing major traffic jams, sadly. So I think we should try it, absolutely.
I agree. I feel like that would help enormously, not just for the businesses, but in giving residents a sense of safety, a feeling of it. I will say in our district, it's particularly hard. We're an emergency thoroughfare and we have the bus lines come through. So we've never been able to do a full street closure. I get asked repeatedly. It's just not something, we have a fire station. It's not possible. But taking up the parking lanes, would be a wonderful compromise. And I think what we've seen so far is nobody really misses the parking. So I think it's a good idea.
I agree also. I think anything you can do to, utilize even more outdoor space, we can get around the weather concerns and, and promoting it, collaboratively with the restaurants, I think is a great idea.
Councilor Bach, do you have any other questions?
No, I think just I don't know, just if Michael wanted to speak at all to Newbury Street on this, and then I think I'm done.
Yeah, the with Newbury Street, I think that really makes sense. We kind of discussed that. We spoke, and we've already tried that a little bit with the Open Newbury, and obviously it's like a small step sort of thing. But I think the pedestrianization of the city and really having a main thoroughfare, main location for that, Newbury really lends itself to that. And I think it would really benefit not only the retail, the restaurants, the shops, the salons, everybody on Newbury. It would also really benefit the landlords in terms of property value and stuff like that, which would be incentive for them to push for it as well. The street is a minor amount of parking, and it's also a very highly trafficked street for people looking for parking. So the traffic on Newbury is primarily people searching for parking, which isn't ideal. And it's a street that really lends itself to that walking European style. And I think it would make the revival of Newbury Street and Back Bay, would make that revival much quicker and much more swift by saying, hey, we can make this a destination. We can make this a Lincoln Road in Miami. We can make this a thoroughfare for pedestrians where you can walk around, have a good night, have dinner, buy some stuff at a shop, get some ice cream. And that's all independence. Primarily there's some larger companies obviously there now, but Newbury has historically been an independent, small retail street with high end, low end, local stuff. So I think that's something where we're taking as much little baby steps as we can, be it the patios, be it Open Newbury, be it whatever it is. But the traffic patterns, there's easy solutions for it. Boylston goes one way, Commack goes the other way. Newbury is not a necessity of a street, and keeping the cross streets open. Something where people can go there and be like, let's just walk the street. And, operators can say, we have now a better patio. We can now kind of expand that. Retail can expand onto the street and make it really lively. And that's, springtime to late fall. And then, Nantucket does a stroll in December, holiday season. Why doesn't Newbury Street have a stroll like that? Why can't we just say we're going to shut the whole street down and everyone's going to come there? So I think there's a lot of opportunity there that we're missing, and we need a little convincing for everyone. But I think that's something in the future that
it really, really makes sense for everyone involved.
If I could jump back 1 minute, and because I think Michael's made a great point in that it's not just restaurants, it's everybody, it's every business. Because when if the restaurants are out there, it just brings people and brings folks to those shops. But the other thing is, and I want to make sure it's not said, we have got to build a reason for people in Linfield, Framingham, Dedham, and Norfolk to come into Boston. Because we have the highest density of restaurants, licenses, seats anywhere in New England, anywhere in the Northeast, with the exception of New York City. And if we do not build a campaign that tells people, hey, come on in, it's really cool, come back in and do what you normally can't, then we're going to have people dying on a vine quickly. And so it is critical that we come up with some of these ideas and campaigns in order to keep this thing going. So, and again, I apologize, but I will jump out, but Steve will be here to take my place here in a couple minutes.
Yeah, and
Thanks, Bob.
before you go, I just want to say that's a really cool idea and campaign. I'm speaking out of turn and utilizing my privilege as the chair to say that I really do think that these times require us to not only think outside the box, but to be a little bit more aggressive in our approach to how we engage our consumers. And I think the fact that so many folks who are no longer now working in the city of Boston because they're doing remote work, that we have an opportunity to cultivate that market and create opportunities to literally wine and dine them during these times. So I think, Mr. Luce, it's something worth looking into. And I just want to be super mindful of time. We've asked that each of our colleagues have 5 minutes. So Councilor Bach, because you are the co-sponsor, I gave you a little bit of extra time, but don't anyone think that that's going to be the case for you, with the exception of Councilor Braden, because you're also the co-sponsor. So you now have the floor.
Thank you. I'm also curious to hear, are there any other creative ideas that we might be thinking about, and what sort of support would be needed from the city? I'm thinking, in Europe and in Ireland, where I come from, there's, they have outdoor busking and music and outdoor performance that makes the outdoor space a lively place for people to be as well. So I'm just wondering what other creative ideas you folks might have knocking around in your heads. Thank you.
I'm going to assume anyone who is inspired to answer that is more than welcome to. And don't let me have to pick you out, because I will. So I'm going to go.
I can comment on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, any space where there's pedestrians and it's a lively space, I think it's going to lend itself to that naturally, right? And there can be, city approval and permitting and whatever needs to be done. But I think that anytime there's a space where it's an active pedestrian, if you just think of Times Square in New York, just to that area, and they pedestrianize that heavily, you're saying, okay, there's so many people around. Well, now there's opportunity for street art, there's opportunity for music, there's opportunity for, break dancer, whatever it is, something that's interesting like that. Any pedestrian friendly zone is going to have an opportunity to add that to it. And there's different neighborhoods and different locations. I live in East Boston. There's plenty of locations in East Boston that should be just pedestrian. Maverick Square, we could figure that out there. But there's space for it in the city, and there's a draw for it, and it makes the city more appealing. The city, people want to live in the city because it's a fun place, it's exciting, it's compact. There's people right now are afraid of it, but people are packed in together, and we should utilize that and say, let's make this a city that people want to come to. Boston's one of the best tourist cities in the country, period, because it's so walkable, it's so compact, everything's really nearby. So why don't we capitalize on that more and say, let's promote the businesses, let's make this the place that everyone wants to go. Why would you stay hanging out on the weekends in Norfolk or Lexington or Linfield or wherever you want to come to Boston to hang out to get the stuff you can't get in the suburbs.
Just to tack onto that idea, if it was suddenly easier to have food vendors out there, food trucks, food carts, like have an attraction for those pedestrian events as well. If it's easier to put those out there, we'll be assisting the businesses, but that will be a draw for all of the people to come visit those kinds of events.
And one thing I just add is, you know, I mentioned that some of the events on Canal Street before, but one of them was tied to a country concert that was at the TD Garden. But one of the local establishments hired the country singers, you know, and that they were an extension of their entertainment license, which allowed that. If there's a way, we have a lot of talent in this city. If there's a way we can utilize the public space for the talent and have it be collaboratively with the Arts Academy or, you know, some other entity, whether it's Berklee College of Music that's in the city. If there's a way that they, I'm sure, are wanting to get their folks that are talented, you know, out to promote their work and to see their work, we could utilize that public space, which may be adjacent to a lot of the restaurants that, you know, could utilize the public space for seating, but they wouldn't be burdened with, you know, with having the entertainment license extended beyond their premises. And, you know, it's something that they could all benefit from. But some of the talent in the city that is cultivated at some of our institutions can be highlighted too.
Thank you for that. I'm just curious, Councilor Breeden, you have any other questions?
That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am going to ask my colleagues in the order of arrival. I believe we've lost Councilor Flynn and Councilor Arroyo. So I'm going to have Councilor Campbell. You now have the floor if you have questions.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I don't have more questions. Many were asked and answered with respect to listening to just the ideas. I think just one point that I want to lift up as a district councilor largely for Mattapan and Dorchester is that there are many folks who, well, if you live in Mattapan where I live, who go the opposite direction, right? Not necessarily towards downtown. And so in talking about the marketing campaigns or ways in which to pull in folks from every part of the city to support businesses, not just here in our district, but across the city, just to be intentional there, because there are a lot of folks in this part of the city that want to be supportive, that understand the economic devastation with respect to our small businesses, either as small business owners themselves or as folks who just care deeply about communities having local ownership and local establishments that are diverse. And so just lifting that piece up, which has come to our attention quite a bit, is that folks here want to also be helpful and a part of the many conversations, even if they're not necessarily organized by main streets, which we sometimes don't have in certain parts of the district. So just want to lift that up and really appreciate the concrete and specific ideas here. We've done some of that with respect to some businesses, but it tends to be ad hoc or piecemeal, not necessarily part of a larger plan. And so I'm happy to continue to be a part of this conversation. So it's all coordinated and connected across our neighborhoods. So thank you. And thank you to all the folks who are taking time out of their busy schedules to really participate. I know how busy you guys are. And thank you again to the makers. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Looking forward to the city administration part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Councilor Campbell. I am going to now move on to Councilor O'Malley. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a lot of these questions may be more specifically geared towards the administration folks, but since we have owners, operators, advocates here, I guess help me walk through what the process is. We've talked about sort of the success of allowing for outdoor seating, taking certain parking spaces, and that's obviously going to continue to be part of it. But I want to speak specifically about ways that we can allow for outdoor seating in the months. I just shared on social media a letter that I'd sent to Chief Barros on September 4th, just asking, and it was alluded to in my opening statement, and several of you picked up on it as well, what the exact process is in terms of extending the time period, and then also allowing for the outdoor heaters or certain tenting that would facilitate the ability to have outdoor seating longer. I don't know who said it, but it was absolutely true that certain restaurants, have a great patios or can enjoy outdoor space in the warmer months and even some of the early fall. But just as Bostonians, they wouldn't be used as frequently as we get into this time of year, or certainly into November. That's changed. I mean, the world as we know it is completely different. And I think that you will see huge numbers of people taking advantage of these small businesses, particularly these locally owned and operated businesses, and bundling up to have a meal outside. So I guess, I'm partial to Ginger because she's one of my incredible Main Streets directors in District 6. But if anyone wants to sort of pop in, Jay's another guy I've known for years, what the process currently is and what barriers it would be if I'm a restaurateur who was lucky enough to be able to secure some area, some of my own, some of city property to facilitate outdoor dining. What would the steps needed to, what are the current steps and barriers that exist to creating, say, an outdoor heater or heat lamps, as well as certain tenting? Obviously, I'm looking for both what the cost would be, to have to procure this infrastructure, but also is it going through, working with the fire department, going through ISD? So if anyone wants to tackle that, I'm curious to see if this is, if nothing else, a way that we can identify an easier way going forward. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Douglas.
I can answer that one. So the initial process back in the summer when the extended outdoor patios were allowed was to apply through the licensing board. And there was, I believe, a multi-department application. And quite frankly, I was impressed at how quickly they moved those things forward. Once we got all the applications and the forms in, they moved very quickly. Then just recently, the mayor's administration and the fire department had announced a process to permit portable propane heaters. So before that was allowed, I already went out and bought 9 propane heaters in anticipation that they might be permitted. And I was going to return them if they weren't. There's no more propane heaters to be had anywhere. You can't find them. There's none available anywhere, portable propane heaters. So if you have them, great. You have to apply through the fire department, and they permitted me in about a week. So we are now approved in 2 locations for portable propane heaters. As of now, there is no allowance for an enclosed area on public property. And that's what Bob Luz was talking about, was hoping to come up with a process and an approval method. And it has to come from policy from the top, I believe, to permit some kind of tenting or structure that you can maintain heat on. But that's where we are today.
So can I just follow up? And I appreciate that, Douglas. That's helpful. When you talk about no tents, I understand the caution about allowing for sort of a 4-sided temporary structure, which would, potentially cause some of the issues that the dining in would. But is there also a prohibition with just an overhead tent? Mindful of the fact that when it gets bitterly cold, that's still not going to serve the purpose. But for the short term, and I'm talking about perhaps when it rains, are there prohibitions for just a tent with no walls on the side that still allows for the open area?
Yes, it's prohibited on public property, parking spaces and plazas and sidewalks. There's no allowance for any kind of tenting or canopy on public property. On private property, you can apply and get permitted for that. But one other thing that I wanted to mention is presently there is no allowance whatsoever for any music to be played or entertainment outdoors. That's another thing that would really add, and many of my customers have said, why can't you turn the music on? Can you open your windows? Can you put a speaker out here? I do understand it, and my understanding is that in the North End, some people took advantage of it and were blasting music and the residents were complaining. I get it, but if you could find a way to allow some music, maybe if somebody has a large enough space, even live music. When the weather comes back in the spring, it would be a huge attraction. It would add life and vitality and energy to the streets. I hope we can find a way to make that happen.
I do too, and I believe we can. And I know Leslie Delaney Hawkins is on and will be in the next panel. In what I'd
just like to say, Councilor O'Malley, just in terms of time, the ringer did go off a few seconds ago, and I'm giving you a little bit of extra time just if you need it. But I just want to be super mindful that we have another panel to go. So
Certainly. Well, I will just say in closing, Madam Chair, that I agree with you. I hope we can make those changes. I think what I appreciate about hearings like this is that, you know, there is no one fit solution for everything. Yes, there are certain restaurants where live music or even audio system could be problematic, but there are countless others where it would be celebrated. Similarly, a prohibition on tenting, that's something that we as a city can do. I look forward to working with the administration to changing that to support our restaurants and making it easier to continue. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all.
thank you, Councilor O'Malley. I am now going to ask my colleague, Councilor Asabi George, see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know whether this is a question or more of a comment for a response at another time, but one of my concerns, and I think this has been alluded to, and it may have been covered before I signed on because I was late, is the expense, the great deal of expense that many of our businesses would have to undertake in order to make any of these changes. And the igloos are fantastic, but they're not cheap. I've seen them just simply online, and they're a great deal of expense for our businesses. And I don't know whether as a city we can commit to covering or supporting covering some of those expenses. So whether that's, if anyone's looked at sort of the pricing and the impact that has on local businesses, we've got to give them the tools, and the policy creates the tools and the vehicle, but then you still need to, there's still a cost of doing business that way, associated with the outdoor dining, associated with the tenting, associating with the purchase of the heaters, which are hard to get now. So I don't know if anyone can speak a little bit to the cost impacts, the cost of
I
doing
can.
business, and the role, thank you, Ginger, and the role that the city can play in helping, although I don't know if that's something we can cover across the board. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ginger.
I just want to say really briefly, we have a grant program to assist our businesses specifically with reopening expenses, particularly anyone who had outdoor seating. And we asked them roughly how much did you spend between $1,000 and $2,500, $2,500 to $5,000, $5,000 to $10,000, and like 80% of the answers were $2,500 to $5,000 for jersey barriers, fences, tables, and chairs. It does not include any of the expenses needed for winterizing their outdoor seating.
Can I comment on that as well?
Sure.
We spent, with two locations, Gloucester Street and Newbury, we easily spent $7,000 each in terms of jersey barriers, rentals, umbrellas, getting our stuff onto the street, decor, and that's done as a temporary purchase. We're not sure if we can continue that next year. Whereas if we're saying, okay, we know we can do that next year, we're gonna say, let's figure out how we can do that, how we can make that nicer, how we can make that something that's presentable to have on Newbury Street or on Gloucester Street or in any neighborhood, really. So that's something where I think, the cost is very high, but we're also saying this might be a temporary thing where that stuff is then trash. So how can we be sure that if we're making this investment, if we're buying heaters, if we're buying planters, that, you can use that next year, you can be sure of that next year. And I think that, operators would like clarity on that and saying, okay, if I'm going to purchase something, I want to purchase it to have it for several years, not for 4 months.
Well, I certainly hope, as an at-large city councilor, I certainly hope that we continue, at least in the warm seasons, with the outdoor seating, and that those investments that businesses and restaurants have made for that outdoor experience, I don't want to see that wasted. I think that it was a really wonderful experience altogether. But the winter months are different, and that investment is a great deal more. So the $7,000 or the $5,000 that has been spent to date, that is nothing compared to what it's going to cost to weatherize over the winter. And I think that the timer has gone off. So if anyone has an additional response to that, I appreciate it. I think that's my time.
You have 1 minute and 36 seconds. So if anyone else is interested in answering, you are more than welcome to.
I'd be happy to talk about an expense that restaurants have made that would, be very helpful. And that's liquor licenses and liquor license reform. As I have 4 locations as an operator, I'm talking about several hundred thousand, over $1 million in terms of liquor licenses. And liquor licenses are now going to be hugely devalued. And places are closing because they're trying to get rid of their liquor license while it's still at value, but that's just going to go very far down. Other panelist has 8 locations. I'm sure he's sitting on a huge amount of liquor licenses and the expense with that every year, renewals, etc. And the city has talked about trying to say, let's expand the liquor licenses, let's move those to other neighborhoods. How can we do that? And the big challenge is that people that are holding licenses are going to be very upset about that. If you have 10 licenses worth $450,000 a piece, you're not going to be very open to having free licenses delivered to other places in the city that it's going to devalue your asset that you paid for and you financed and you paid interest on and you pay yearly on. So I think if the city can at least kind of discuss that, and the licensing board, how we can compensate owners for their licenses and then eliminate the open market of free trading of licenses where it's just a city provided asset. That is like, that's a other level. That's above, free heaters or something like that. That's something that would say, this is a way that we're going to really support independent businesses. Because if I close and, Cheesecake Factory wants to buy a license, they can buy whatever license they want. Any major corporation could just pick up a license and buy it and say, see you later. It's just small operators. So I think that's a big challenge where everyone that's sitting on any licenses right now is going to be hugely devalued. A beer and wine license, I just purchased one in February for $140,000. You can buy one now for $95,000. So I just lost $50,000 as a small operator. So I think that's something where independents and small groups, local groups, are really, really going to struggle with that. And if we want to promote more restaurants in East Boston and Hyde Park and Rosendale and West Roxbury and JP and Mattapan, and say, hey, you want to open a taco shack with, some beer? Well, now you can do it without having that huge expense and that huge liability and that huge risk. And, operators that have those licenses can now operate and say, okay, we're going to cash in our licenses, but they need to also be compensated for that because they've already paid for it. So I think that's something in terms of cost that's above everything, and everyone's seeing that right now. That's why Boylston Street, 4 of the major bars right on Boylston Street in front of the convention center just closed. They didn't close because business. They closed because they are going to get their $500,000 for their liquor licenses. So I think that's a big thing to consider.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for that. Really do appreciate it. I'm going to move on to the next panel, but before I do, I just kind of want to offer something that perhaps the city can consider as it relates to the storage of a lot of these items, and just curious as to whether or not there's an interest to partner up with U-Haul and other storage companies that may want to donate their space as just being good partners in the city of Boston, and potentially do so regionally, where the city can leverage its power of being able to say, hey, do you think that this cohort of restaurants can get a small space to put away all of their items so that they can pick back up in the spring? I think that, these moments, going back to Mr. Luce's idea of like really thinking outside the box, is that we also need to, as a city, look at the power of doing business in Boston and the opportunities we have to engage folks to participate in supporting small businesses. And I think that this could be something that we could consider exploring. And if not, the city, I know that as the chair of small businesses, I'm really invested in making sure that we remove barriers and hardships for businesses that are really struggling to survive during these times. And so maybe, Natalia and I can talk offline and figure out how we can support these small businesses and tackle a few partners that will be willing to open up their doors literally to allow these businesses to serve as storage areas for free, of course, at no charge. Just because I think that this is what we need to do so that all means all can survive this situation right now. So that's just something that I'd like to offer. I didn't have any questions lined up specifically to the small businesses. I'm here facilitating this hearing. I do have most of my questions are for the administration. and it would be unfair for me to hold you all hostage as panelists for the first round. But I think it's important, if you are interested in staying, you're more than welcome to. I always like to create opportunities for those who are living the realities and doing the work to also ask questions. So it's not just the counselors that have an opportunity to ask questions. I like to create space for other folks to also join in the dialogue. That's not normally how it's done, but I think that oftentimes we need to create space for those folks who are living the realities to also have questions for the administration, things that we may not potentially be thinking about. So if you're interested in joining in the dialogue, you're more than welcome to stay, and I'll call on you when it's time to ask questions. So, so really appreciate your participation. And in the interest of time, I am going to move on to the second panel. Once again, we're going to ask panelists to please keep their testimonies to no more than 5 minutes. We will start with the Director of Small Business, Natalia Ugarte. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Counselor. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Natalia Urtubey, Director of Small Business in the Office of Economic Development. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have around reopening of our small business, in particular restaurants. I do want to address a couple of the comments that were made earlier just around funding and supports, and want to just remind folks that the City of Boston has been issuing grants to small businesses for the last, I don't know, 6 months or so to help businesses reopen. The Reopen Boston Fund is still open, and it's available to all businesses as they gear up to reopening. A couple of the requirements are that they're based in Boston, that they have less than 25 employees, and that they work in close proximity with their clients. And so obviously restaurants definitely fall into that. To date, we've given out over $2.5 million. And again, these are direct grants to businesses, so they are getting that funding, from the city in order to be able to purchase all of the materials that they need in order to reopen safely. And we've been very proud of that, and we'll continue to offer those grants. As far as the requirements go, I'm very glad to have been able to partner with our colleagues in the licensing department, the PIC, which includes Public Works and Streets, cabinets, just around all of the logistics around reopening. I do want to commend the licensing board for their flexibility and the ability for us to shift an entire process really quickly. We did a presentation a couple of maybe like a month ago or so, where we talked about the timeline of from when we started talking about this process and being able to execute on it. It was a 1-week turnaround, which has been just an incredible feat. And there are a lot of different departments to be noted for that immense work. I also obviously want to call out the Inspectional Services Department, Fire Department, Boston Water and Sewer, et cetera, because there's been just this is a tremendous collaborative effort. I'm not going to speak around the actual permits because we don't issue those permits. Those are issued by the licensing board and other departments, and so I'll let them have some time. My team has been doing direct outreach in our neighborhoods in order to help businesses go through the entire process of opening outdoor patios. So we've helped one-on-one with more than 20 businesses where we help them with, again, our city partners to get jersey barriers, ramps, these grants to actually go through the application process, actually draw out the specs that are required, help them think through where they would be situated. So we will continue to help businesses one-on-one as needed because sometimes the bureaucracy and all of the steps are confusing. And I think part of our strategy from the jump during this pandemic has been to look at our processes, look at how we can eliminate barriers and figure out how we can better support our small businesses. And I think this experience so far is a true testament to that. So I'll yield the rest of my time, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions, but I want to make sure that my colleagues get a chance to tell you about the process and some of those questions that are still unclear and out there for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalia. Really do appreciate your remarks. And I'm going to move on to who's up next. Our second panelist is actually the Chief of Staff, Chris English. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Counselor. Just don't have much of an opening statement here, other than to say that ISD is really looking forward to working with the council and all the other city departments and agencies that have been involved over the past few months on figuring out some creative solutions for the winter. Happy to answer any questions from the council moving forward on specifics, but just wanted to say that I'm available and happy to try to help move this forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you guys are doing rapid rounds here. I'm going to keep it moving then. I'm going to move on now to Assistant Commissioner Dan Manning. You now have the floor. Is he with us?
Counselor, Dan isn't participating today, so I'm here representing ISD.
Okay. Okay, then. Moving on. I'm following my script. So I'm going to move on to our over to Director Vineet Gupta. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Constable. I'm Vineet Gupta. I'm the Planning Director at the Boston Transportation Department. But I can speak both for Public Works and BTD. And actually just following Chris's kind of lead, I'm here to answer questions. And really, we've been lucky to work with the licensing board who've shown great leadership in expediting the permitting process. And as far as Public Works and BTD go, we've made sure that we've been effective in giving giving up our sidewalks and giving up our streets for outdoor dining in a way that was safe and useful for both people who run restaurants, the actual owners, and people who dine outside. Happy to answer any questions.
Great.
I see Leslie is here too, so.
Yes, she's on the list.
Okay.
Okay, I'm the facilitator here, okay? So don't worry, she's up. She's not gonna be next, but I'm gonna move on to her shortly. But in the meantime, I'm gonna move on to Director Jacob Wessel. You now have the floor.
Thanks, Counselor. Jacob Wessel, Public Realm Manager with the Transportation Department. I'll just sort of defer to what Vineet had spoken to earlier. Happy to answer any questions about the work around restaurants or other repurposing of street space for public use, either in new ways or in ways that we've done in the past few years as the call for the hearing mentioned. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to now move on to Leslie Hawkins. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Counselor, and thank you to all the members of the council for giving us this opportunity to appear before you. I do want to apologize. There is road work going on my street, so if you get that background noise, that is what it is. Just wanted to make a couple quick points, and then I'm really just here as a resource to hear your thoughts and to answer any questions that you have. When we got our first inquiry as the licensing board at kind of the beginning of COVID, looking forward to the summer, in the warmer months, we, in the period of 1 month, went from having no online application process to permitting within 30 days our first outdoor dining location. There were certainly plenty of lessons learned in that process, and I know we're all working together with this team, with our licensees, with other departments, to look at in the the future seasons how we can continue to do this on a kind of an expedited basis. To be completely frank, A member of our team, Rebecca Fu, who has been absolutely phenomenal, created a Google document. And that is how we actually did this. And to date, we've permitted over 550 of these. Again, there are certainly areas we can improve in, and we're committed to doing that. But I do want to note that we went from nothing to actually permitting outdoor dining in the period of 30 days, which that is a credit to the city, to this team, and to our licensees for working with us. While there has not been a formal announcement about outdoor dining in the next season, obviously we know that these are incredibly challenging times, and the mayor, the administration, the council, and all of these departments are completely committed to anything and everything we can do to help our licensees. One of the things I want to note is that legally, we did not wait for the governor and the action at the state level to allow for temporary extensions of outdoor dining. What we did was we worked very diligently as a board and with the law department to review the law and our rules and regulations to determine whether we could do it through our existing temporary extension program. And anyone who's ever been to an event at Florian Hall on the parking lot, or to a wedding in the extension of an adjacent establishment, that's been done through our outdoor temporary extension process. And that's what we implemented here on a large scale, citywide, temporary, non-precedent setting basis. So obviously, as everyone here knows, we waived all fees, we waived all community process. And to the point about entertainment, I know Doug Bacon, who's one of our very well-known licensees, and we always appreciate his input. One of the reasons we did not allow entertainment this season, it was very specific because, one, this was for dining, right? This wasn't for going and watching a Red Sox game. Not that that was happening at the time, but it wasn't for entertainment. And we really wanted to make sure that people weren't lingering and they weren't congregating. The other piece is that we're trying to strike a balance between helping our licensees and also ensuring the quality of life of our residents. And as you all know, when you're representing your constituents, there is a lot of opinions and feelings when it comes to outdoor entertainment, even something as limited as background music. So it was a way to kind of balance those competing interests to ensure that we were providing our licensees this lifeline, and at the same time, we were also respecting the kind of quality of life of our residents. Next summer, when we're looking at doing this, and we're very involved in looking at how to refine this process and replicate it on an even more expedited basis for next year. That it will certainly, depending on incoming public health metrics, that will be a big part of the conversation. I know there are a lot of questions, so I will yield my time to the next panelist, and then I'm here again to answer any questions you have and just as a resource, and we really appreciate the brainstorming.
Thank you. Thank you. And you literally did not yield much time, but 10 seconds, but we do appreciate you trying to end on time. I am going to ask, and I'm going to first move on to Councillor Bach and then Councillor Breed. And I do have, and I'm not sure, Douglas, how long you're going to stay on, but before you go, I really think it's important for me to say this while you're still here, because you mentioned something around the workforce and how I think it was you, how many employees you've lost as a result of COVID. And I think we don't have any members here from the administration that represents the workforce development aspect of this conversation, but I think that it's something for us to worth us looking into in terms of the impact of the restaurant business on the workforce and ways that the city of Boston can help support our restaurant owners in this process. I'm curious, just offline, is something for us to think about or actually follow up with you directly on, is the workforce and how this has impacted your employees and ways that we can be of support. So just curious, if you don't mind.
I just had to unmute. So great. I'm happy that you asked this question because I have 3 locations that have outdoor patios. I really am glad you brought this up. One of them has not really been successful because in Kenmore Square, there is not a density of population and enough foot traffic to make my Kenmore Square location successful. But my two Alston locations that have outdoor space, I have employees on the payroll happy to come to work, earning almost the same wages they were making before. Most of their income is in tips. And sometimes they make $30 and more an hour working out on the patio, and they're happy to come to work. And there was quite a bit of reticence in the beginning, and people wearing face masks and face guards with plexiglass, and as well as the masks. And now there's a much greater comfort level among my staff. Now, again, knock on wood, I've got about 80 people working. I opened up in early July, my first location. I now have 4 open with 3 outdoor patios. I don't have a single case of anybody who came back to work who has subsequently tested positive for COVID. My employees feel happy to come to work. They take pride in serving the people in the community, and they're making a good living. So thank you for asking the question.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Of being the chair of this, and I went out of order, so I'm so sorry, Kenzie. Councillor Bach, I'm gonna turn it back to you. You now have the floor for questions.
Great, thank you so much, and that's certainly your prerogative as chair. I'll ask a first round of questions. I have quite a lot of questions, and so you should feel free to cut me off, Madam Chair, and then I can ask them in a second round. I think the first thing
25 minutes, right, for questions?
Yep, sounds good. And so I think the first thing I just want to ask the administration is, one of the things we've heard a lot is just, predictability, and for these operators being able to plan ahead for next year. So I really want to know, like, how soon can we expect, Leslie, you mentioned that we haven't made a commitment yet, but how soon can we expect to be able to put out dates and a clear, firm commitment to outdoor dining next year? And then my other question is around that is really more for Vineet and Jacob, but also the whole interagency team that has to work on this. I think, we obviously didn't do the pedestrianization events of Open Newbury, Open Charles. Jay Walsh, who was on, talked about having closed Canal Street in the past. And I think it's not just great if we could do those next year, but also if we could plan them ahead, right? Pedestrianization events, thinking about where there might be an opportunity to do them on a recurring basis, a weekly thing, do more of them out in the neighborhoods. Ginger Brown spoke to the fact that it's challenging on their main street because of the fire lane, but that at least something where you took a whole parking lane might be really great. So I guess I'm just thinking about the fact that there are things here that are nice for our operators if we do, but they're twice as good if we announce them with them having enough time to kind of plan their lives around them. So I would love to hear from the administration about timeline on both those fronts.
Thank you, Councillor. I will take the first question. And I think the mayor and the board, and I think all of this interdepartmental team are committed to outdoor dining next year. I don't think anyone wants to make an announcement about exactly what the process looks like until we've kind of completed, and we're actively working on it, evaluating our process this year so that we can make it even more accessible. But I don't think it is inappropriate to say that we will see outdoor dining again in this coming year on a temporary kind of basis, as opposed to going through, a traditional permanent extension. And I think there will be forthcoming announcements on that in the near future. But I do want to emphasize that we are very actively working, and we're collaborating with a Harvard Business School fellow on actually even further streamlining our process, because for as quickly as we got it off the ground, there are a lot of lessons to learn. We always point to the North End when we opened up there all at once, and kind of had to then reevaluate the barriers to ensure public safety. So I think we know that outdoor dining has been a lifeline. We know it's going to continue to be a lifeline, and we're committed to continuing that.
Thank you. Anyone else from the administration want to respond to that question?
Yeah, I just really quickly, So obviously, as several folks have mentioned, they have purchased materials and things like that. And we acknowledge that, and we want to make sure that as we prepare for whatever comes next, that obviously we're taking into consideration the sooner the better for people to know what, especially because they've made significant financial investments. The city has also made those investments with all of these reopen grants. And so we do want to make sure that we have a process outlined as soon as possible, and just know that we are all working really hard at getting that date and that information out as soon as possible.
Great.
And
Councilor,
Vinit and Jacob on pedestrianization, if you guys can speak to that a bit.
Yeah, but I can take a quick first stab and then Jacob can add. But in general, just like Leslie was saying, we're open to new ideas. We are definitely interested in brainstorming on how we can do open street events on a more regular basis, rather than as kind of, one-offs or thrice a year. So definitely open to doing them more often. We want to do them in a more kind of efficient way without using up too many kind of resources to manage them, if we are in fact doing them more often. So it'll also mean stronger partnerships with people who have businesses or live in these corridors. And so that's something we can work in over the winter and into spring. Jacob, if you wanted to add something, please.
Yeah, I would say on the both. Yeah, I would just to stress, I guess, what everyone else is saying, that we'll probably have more information later this year on the outdoor seating, and we're working sort of as quickly as we're able to, because we do realize, and we're fielding questions from business owners just as you are on what to do with all of those materials. And as someone who works on behalf of the transportation department trying to store some of our things over the winter, it's quite the tall task to find storage space. So we hear you loud and clear, and that's something that we're working to get to as soon as we're able. On the pedestrian events and open streets, you couldn't agree more that it's something that we would like to do a lot more of. It's something we were prepping on doing more of this year until the pandemic hit. And in years past, we've had about a month lead time announcing those events, and that's not enough time to sort of plan in an adequate way to be able to prepare your business and things like of that nature. And some of those events that you've talked about on Canal or Charles Street happened weeks or days to get those approvals. So I think, as Vinit mentioned, we want to sort of come back maybe in late winter, early spring 2021 to announce a schedule that is something that folks can plan for through the spring, summer, and fall of 2021, and also look to more events in the neighborhoods as well. As Vinit mentioned, some of these can be resource intensive, with particularly with police details and with sort of getting all the physical things and people power out there to manage them. And so we want to be sure that we can work with other departments on how to have these events in an easier way, so that we can sort of rinse and repeat and sort of unlock all of that potential that happens when we open our streets to pedestrians and businesses.
Great. No, I think that's so important. And I think having some kind of interest form way for Main Streets districts and neighborhood groups and all to indicate an interest, just as you guys are thinking about that, to kind of make sure that people can raise their hand and say, we would love to do something, might be helpful. And I know, I'm sure I'm out of time. I'll just raise that what doesn't fit in that timeline is the possibility of us doing kind of holiday market, 4-season type things this winter, even, to be a little bit more like the cities to our north that really take advantage of outdoor activity in the streets, even in the winter.
Yes, and no one will be responding to that at this point. We're gonna wait. So just because we're coming up at almost 5, and I wanted to make sure that the rest of our colleagues have an opportunity to ask questions. And if there is an opportunity for a second round, Councilor Bach, I'll be going to you first, okay? So we'll go to Councilor Breeden. You now have the floor.
I'm just curious, this is maybe a question for Jacob, about how many actual locations we do have outdoor dining or patio on the public, on the street or in parking spaces. How many have you folks been working with? And also the location of them. Are they focused downtown, or are they scattered through the neighborhoods as well?
So Councillor, I can actually answer that. We have approved 550 of that. I believe 491 are on the public way. Of that 491, so that's either sidewalks or parking lanes, maybe 5 are kind of one-offs in park spaces. So the vast majority are on the public way. They have been distributed throughout the city, but to one of the points I think Natalia made earlier, and when we're talking about refining the process and making it even more accessible, we found that we did a lot of outreach to the neighborhoods to make sure that they were aware of the program, and we did a lot of working with Natalia's team to kind of help walk them through, because even with this kind of expedited process, it is still challenging. If you've never even made your own hand-drawn floor plan, it is a barrier to entry for a lot of these small businesses. So one of the things I think we want to see as a city next year is even more activity in our neighborhoods.
And Councillor Breeden, just so you know, there is a full list of all of the outdoor extensions. So we put together a list of open restaurants on boston.gov/restaurant-support. And of those, you can actually look and filter for outdoor dining. So we've been working really closely with the licensing board on getting an updated list and having that be really reflective online. I will say that there are some restaurants out there that have gone through the permitting process, have been awarded an extension, but haven't actually used it. So there are some of those that are listed on the website that maybe did not actually implement their outdoor seating for various reasons. And so I encourage everybody to take a look at that list and support the local businesses in their districts.
Thank you for that information. Thank you, and I'm glad to hear that they're spread out throughout the whole city, not just in the downtown areas. So, thank you.
Yeah. And I'll just add, if you're more of a visual learner, at boston.gov/healthy streets, there's also a map where those we drag those locations from that list, and it's plotted on a map if you want to take a look at your district. In addition to the great pop-up bike lane work and bus lane work that Vineet and the team at BTD have been shepherding, there's little dots where every restaurant has outdoor seating located in the public right of way.
I also think when COVID will be over sometime, but I think this has given us an opportunity to try out some innovative ways to think about our small businesses and our business districts, and hopefully we'll learn some lessons that we'll be able to put into action post-COVID, make our street life and our community more lively, outdoor dining and whatever, make it more of a European feel to it. But that might be something fun to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Breeden. Before I move on to my colleagues, I'm going to utilize the privilege of being the chair. I do have a few questions and wanted to see if, Natalia, if you could just quickly, in the follow-up in terms of the number of licenses that have been given, or Heather, I'm not sure which, do you have any data by neighborhoods in terms of how many restaurants applied and are operating for the outdoor patio? Do you have that data by neighborhood?
Yeah, I'll let Leslie respond. And again, that list that I mentioned earlier that is public facing can be filtered by neighborhood. Just so the council knows, we did outreach to every single neighborhood, every single commercial district, with the goal of ensuring that every district had at least one restaurant that they could support, obviously. I'll let Leslie touch on the specifics data. I'm not sure we have it right in front of us, but it is available publicly on the website.
That's great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Natalia. We do have that, Councillor, and we can get that to you with the neighborhood breakdown.
That's great. And do you know how you were able to help support some of the businesses that are less tech savvy those types of businesses that may not have access to the internet, or they do, they just use it on their smartphones? Like, how are you guys able to overcome the digital divide in terms of your outreach? And also, how are you able to help inform businesses whose English may not be their first language?
Yeah, that's a
pass that off to Natalia.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, so my team actually, so my neighborhood business managers on our team actually went and walked and canvassed every single neighborhood, talked to every single restaurant that they could connect with about this opportunity. We are old school. We do a lot of in-person phone calls, obviously email wherever relevant. And we actually, like I said, we walked people through the entire questionnaire, the entire permitting process. We even actually went out there and drew, visited the spaces with Public Works to make sure that everything was feasible before they even applied. For those that didn't have the financial resources or connections to get Jersey barriers to, get all this stuff in order, we helped them do that. Public Works was very generous in lending out Jersey barriers. So we did that hand holding with more than 20 restaurants. I think it's the final number was between 23 and 25 restaurants. And these, again, were really targeted to our immigrant owned businesses, our Black and brown owned businesses, our neighborhood commercial districts and those restaurants. A lot of the folks on my team have speak multiple languages, and so we really do take advantage of our team's incredible skills in that way, but also we bring in translation where necessary, because we know that especially in the restaurant industry, a lot of our restaurant owners are immigrants and don't have the English proficiency to be able to take advantage. And I do want to say that very early on when we were going through this process, we started looking at all of the applicants and noticed major gaps, which is what really sparked a lot of additional work on my team to be able to support these businesses. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Oh, great, thank you. And then I just have two more questions, and they'll be quick. One is, I'm just curious, everything is informed by data these days, whether or not we were going to open up schools, how everything, whether or not we were going to reopen the city. So knowing that data informs everything, and because I've heard a lot around, we're going to go back to normal in 18 months. And I'm just curious why, if there's an opportunity to look at what the data reveals in terms of this 18-month longevity kind of plan. And is it possible to think about supporting these businesses, or at least saying, well, at least we know for the next 18 months that we're not going to go back to normal? If knowing that, can you just extend it so that these businesses can prepare for the long haul for the next 18 months, as opposed to the uncertainty? I don't know, that was a long way of saying, look, we know it's 18 months. If it's 18 months, why not just allow these restaurants to operate with their open patios, at least for the next 18 months?
Councilor, I will take a shot at that. I think the mayor announced last week, I believe, that outdoor dining on private property is extended indefinitely for the term of this public health crisis. In terms of public property, because of the very unique both infrastructure and weather challenges we have here, obviously we had to put an end date, which was extended by the mayor from October 31st to right now, December 1st, weather permitting, at which time the city will take another look at where things stand. And obviously, if we have a very mild winter, we would absolutely like to see this extended, weather permitting, as far as it can go. With the threat of snow, there are some other factors that we have to consider. But even though the specific process and the dates for next warm weather season haven't yet been announced, I think everyone the mayor has made it very clear to everyone in the administration that he wants to see this continue, because it has been such a lifeline to our licensees. And at this point, we're just trying to refine the process so that when we do launch it, that the application process, that it's in an even better place. And we've learned from some of the lessons this year.
And like Councillor Asabi George, I'm a big supporter of making sure that, for me, it's not just about doing business as usual. I really hope that we don't go back to the way we used to do things, and that whatever lessons we were able to learn during this pandemic, that will continue to utilize some of these best practices to remove those barriers, but more importantly, to continue with the outdoor dining and patios and allowing businesses to thrive beyond the pandemic. So that's just, I want to advocate for that. But I know that I'm not here as an advocate, I'm here as the chair, and I'm going to move on and see if my other colleagues have any questions. And I believe we had to lose Councillor Campbell. So I believe the next on the list is Councillor O'Malley from District 6. You now have the floor if you have any questions.
I think we may have lost Councillor O'Malley as well.
Okay, so we're gonna go on to Councillor Asabi George, if you're still here. Both have left the Zoom, y'all. Okay, so I just was notified of that. So I'm gonna, now Kenzie, you're gonna get your moment, because I'm gonna turn the floor right back to you to see if you said you had some additional questions. So Councillor Bach, you now have the floor.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start where I left off, which is just, the prospect for some of our panelists earlier brought up the idea of holiday strolls, I think holiday markets, right? So sort of, one-off kind of chance to give both our retailers and our restaurants a kind of event structure. And then I guess, I don't know that this necessarily belongs to anybody who's here. Maybe it's most OED, and so maybe it's a sort of Natalia question, but I found myself thinking a lot, and Ginger Brown brought it up about like, how could we create a sense of occasion, like the way that we had the Winter Wonderland at City Hall Plaza, could we have kind of outdoor winter attractions scattered around the city this winter that despite snow would kind of pull people out, and again, be a place that we could have food trucks, stalls, vendors, just kind of create that sort of outdoor opportunity for commerce and for socialization to keep up people's spirits. So I'd love to hear from the administration side. We've been talking a lot about next year. I would love to hear what plans are kind of taking shape to think outside the box, like Councillor Mejia says, about the winter season. And I do just want to repeat again that I really think to our north, we have a number of cities that experience more snow and colder weather than we do, and who do more of this in Canada. So it doesn't seem impossible to me.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I want to say, so we work very closely, obviously, with all of the 20 Main Street districts, and anytime they're interested in participating in these types of events, we fully support them. I can remember, just off the top of my head, like the Bike and Brew at Ashmont, the closing down of several areas in order to do this. So we are huge supporters of that. I think part of the need, again, as Vineet mentioned earlier, is that we do need more partnerships. It costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time and a lot of coordination to actually set this stuff up. I want to point out that the Winter Wonderland at City Hall was operated, organized, coordinated by a private company. So, I think there are opportunities for that. And we are more than willing to partner with folks to do that. I will reach out to Ginger tomorrow and chat with her to see if that's something that she's interested in doing in Center South, as well as other districts. And, I think that at the end of the day, we don't have capacity to both put on these events, host them, and organize them because they do require a lot of work. And, Jacob and I have been talking about this for the last 2 years and trying to figure out how to do this more often and make it easier for folks to participate. So I think this is a great opportunity, knowing that we are in this place this winter. I just can't speak to preemptively defining where or what those will look like. But it is definitely something that we will talk about at our next Main Streets meeting. But, we also have partnerships with other chambers of commerce and organizations that are focused on small businesses in areas that aren't specifically main streets. But they do require sponsorship, and they do require a lead organizer to coordinate. And when we have that, it makes it a lot easier to make these reality. But I appreciate the question, and it's definitely something we want to continue to do.
Great. And I guess another question from me is just, and this is sort of about some of the constraints related to departments that aren't here today, but I mean, there was a reference from Leslie to the snow plowing. I mean, I think obviously, you know, we have to have snow. Well, we may have snow and we have to have plow routes and all, but I also think like I could imagine that there might be routes that, you know, have always needed to be cleared for plows. But if we actually had the opportunity for a real 4-season thing out there, like we might need to change our rule around that. And similarly, I think obviously some of our fire lane rules seem to be constraining our ability to have tenting out on the public street, whereas we heard most of these locations are. I'm thinking also, I mean, obviously the pedestrianization reference to, you know, I think to really do these at scale, we need to figure out ways to do them that don't involve police details. So I guess I'm just wondering some of those kind of nuts and bolts city department norms that we have that are set up, you know, in ordinary business for understandable reasons, but to do any of this at like a greater scale, we might need to shift them a bit. And again, I think that because other cities do it, there are ways to do it safely. I just wondered if anybody here, maybe it's Leslie, maybe it's someone else, could speak to kind of adjusting some of those things. I know the tent issue has come up in the North End.
Absolutely, Counselor. And I know we've got Vineet and we've got Jacob, so I won't pretend to speak for PIC, but the decision on the tents on the public way, I think when we're talking about this, we have to remember that we essentially had to come up with this process and these requirements overnight very quickly. So there is absolutely, and to your point, Counselor, there are lessons to be learned from other cities in the United States, other cities elsewhere. The tent piece was based on very definite concerns by fire and public safety that the tents would interfere with sightlines. Another piece of this is that, like I just said, we had to get this up and going immediately. So, and I'll defer to Chris English and Vineet Gupta, but I do know that part of our ongoing interdepartmental conversations is about reevaluating that and looking at creating standards that may make tents on the public way feasible. But at the end of the day, public safety is of the utmost importance. And I know the fire department has been very clear that propane heaters under tents are never going to be okay, right? There are just so many concerns with the potential impacts of if a propane heater isn't properly installed, or if you know, there's some sort of malfunction under a tent, that is something that the fire department is really never going to be okay with. That being said, I completely understand there's plenty of room to grow, and that's why we're having these conversations. I think one of the things we all kept saying was that we're building this bike while we're riding it, and we do want to make this process as accessible to all of our licensees and to exist for as long into the colder weather season as we can. So we are continuing those conversations, even if we don't have the answer right now.
Thank you. I just want to know, Councilor Bach, that you are 3 minutes over your time. So
I'm done. I see. Thank you so much. I'm grateful to all the panelists from the administration and also from, you know, the industry. And I just want to say, I think there's a lot of things here for us to still work on, and looking forward to being a partner as a district councilor for my neighborhoods on this, and also just on how we can have a ambitious plan here citywide. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I'm going to move on to my colleague, Councilor Breeden. You now have the floor.
I don't have any more questions, really. I think thinking about this winter in the more short term is something I welcome the conversation about, and I hope we can roll out some events that will help in the short term. I also feel that having a longer term plan, and getting things on the calendar would be really helpful as well. So thank you everyone for your participation this afternoon. I think we need to continue talking and brainstorming and coming up with ideas, and learning from our folks that play outdoors further north in the cold weather. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would also like to just add that for me, I love these hearings because we get to hear directly from the people who are living the realities and doing the work. So we're able to, as a collective, really bring our wisdom together to identify ways that we can all move forward, right? So this is, like, for me, I always see these hearings as an opportunity to do just that. And I think that this hearing was a great example of what that looks like when we bring people across the city in different industries together to talk. I think for me, because I'm a problem solver, I'm always trying to figure out, okay, whenever anyone comes to me with a problem, I got a solution for that. And so I'm just wondering, and this is also something that I think that we can consider, and I know Councillor Bach and Councillor Breeden, you both have a lot of universities and colleges in your districts. I'm just wondering what opportunities exist to partner up with some of these universities so that maybe we can give them a challenge to create some weatherized tents. And no, I'm serious. You guys are joke. You think I'm laughing? No, I'm serious. Like, I think that if we're really, how do we utilize the power that we have? We don't have much power as a city council, but we definitely have a lot of power in terms of how we think and our ability to bring ideas to the space. And so I think that if we can all partner together alongside Natalia and figure out if we can throw out a challenge out there for these universities, MIT, like, or tech places. I don't know who, but I know that there has to be somebody out in the city of Boston who's doing business with us, who is a university or whatever, that we can put out a challenge and they can create a tent that is weatherized or heated or whatever it is. And if there's one that already exists, then I need to know who has it, and we need to figure out how we can get them donated. And maybe we can do literally like a big tent of sorts. Maybe instead of having a whole bunch of tents, maybe if we can get 4 big tents. I don't know if people make them, but if there are any that exist already, maybe we can have 4 or 5, and we can set them up across the city, and restaurants can actually share, literally like share the space. And I don't know how big these tents are, but I don't know. I think there's something there for you all to consider, for you all
Counselor,
to.
I thought you were taking that to a different route of getting some of these students to maybe help coordinate like these outdoor winter markets, which I think would be really fun thing to do and potentially get some help on.
So all of that, and including, it's everything. It's putting these universities and colleges and businesses to work and leveraging their time, energy, and wisdom to help support these small businesses. So it's a challenge on having them organize these upcoming events. And then the other challenge is whoever are the tech savvy people so that they can create heated tents if they don't already exist. I'm sure they do somewhere. And Kenzie, you know better than I do. Do these, if they exist, I want them here in the city of Boston.
I know that infrared heaters, I think, have been part of the solution to the propane situation that was being described. And it does feel like there are some technological solutions we could pursue here. I also would be totally in favor of a canopy that just runs across some of these streets. So as long as we're thinking big, but I totally agree with you, Councillor Mejia. That's how we've got to be thinking.
Yeah, so I'm going to, I don't know if we have any public testimony. Seeing none. I am going to just close out by thanking everyone for participating. I'm going to gavel us out. I really do appreciate the time, energy, and ideas that came of this hearing, and I'm going to gavel us out. So this hearing is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Thanks all.
Bye.